Good evening. You're listening live to the Xtreme movie show, Xtreme TV, where we are debuting our new show, Saturday night, season ones. And of course, we've been doing several of them. I'm your host, Rob, broadcasting to you live from the Pinos Palace, just west of Orlando, Florida, in the Indian Hills studios. Gentlemen, Professor Pixel, RDV are with me tonight. We're going to be discussing this new season one of a show that was a few years old, 5-6 years old, off of El Rey, called From Dusk Till Dawn. Of course, it was based off the movie that we covered recently on the Xtreme Movie Show. And so we wanted to go through season one of it because actually, gentlemen, with my initial thoughts starting about this show is fantastic. It's a great show. Loved it a lot. I'm on my second rewatch. Pixel, I know it's new for you. RDV, I know you've seen it before.
Yep.
Haven't watched it since it debuted on El Rey. And all I got to say is it's a very slick show. And with these first two episodes, nothing but good things to say about them for me. So let's go around the room for our initial impressions. Mr. Pixel, sir, Professor, what's your initial impressions?
I was a bit surprised. I wasn't sure how it was going to go because the movie itself, I know in our review last week, I said that it was kind of slow at the first half.
Right.
But even when it was slow, it was fast paced. So I didn't know how the show was going to go. And it's more slow burn. The entire first episode, it's just the gas station scene. And I honestly really enjoyed that slow burn to it. One thing I have to say is that I am still unsure about how I feel about the flashbacks. Because throughout the show, they will take a scene, and once you go through it, they will flash back to different perspectives on the scene, basically. And I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I think that I'm enjoying that.
Well, we try to be, spoiler free because it's the first watch for you and anybody else that hasn't. And we, of course, assume a lot of people have. So we just take it, 2 episodes at a time here. And I agree with you. The flashback thing kind of threw me off, and I forgot that just how strong of a presence it was in these 2 episodes. And it definitely is a factor in the storytelling that we'll have to discuss there too. So let's go to you, RDV. What are your initial impressions about these first 2 episodes of season 1 of From Dusk Till Dawn?
I kind of like the flashbacks because, the way it starts off, episode 1 is where, here comes Nash Braders. Don Johnson. The Ranger. Can't remember what his name is, but Earl. That's what his name is, Earl. My name's Earl. Well, his name's Earl. But anyway, this. So he comes into the shop, and I noticed the first thing I noticed the shop. Unlike the movie, the shop is actually connected to some other buildings. It's not just out in the middle of nowhere,
True.
Building. So makes me curious. We don't know yet. Are they gonna blow up this building or what? We leave, but anyway. So he walks in. The guy he kind of talks to him and all is, and then the only way that Don Johnson can give that smooth little lines, like he does.
Yeah.
And makes me want, I want more Don Johnson like Western shows now.
It's true, and I tell you, I didn't realize when I saw this, when it debuted on El Rey, that Don Johnson was in it. So when he was in there, I popped pretty hard for him. I'm a big fan of Miami Vice, and I like Don Johnson a lot. He's just a gorgeous individual, and that's kind of one of the themes I had for these first 2 episodes. And so let's talk a little bit about how the show debuted, and I'll go back a little bit. Of course, growing up here in the South, I'm a big wrestling fan. Go back to watching NWA. We only had a few channels here locally, but we'd get stuff out of Tampa. Central Florida is a hotbed of professional wrestling, like golf and theme parks. And so for me, professional wrestling has been really bad for about 20 years now, all of them. And Doctor, I know you and I talk a little bit offline about certain ones and what we like and don't like. It's a little frustrating the way it is because I don't think it's very good. And that being said, when El Rey debuted, I wasn't watching very much wrestling at all. I was just keeping up with it a little bit. I wasn't really watching a lot of television, but this was a new channel that debuted. And of course, Robert Rodriguez was involved in getting it launched. And well, I thought he was a bit stylish with this stuff. And I knew he was involved in, like, From Dusk Till Dawn and some other things that I thought were kind of interesting and neat and okay. I really wasn't prepared for just how awesome the television show, or actually really most of the stuff on the El Rey, the programming was very good because they had martial arts movies. They had their own wrestling show that was just phenomenal on there. Lucha Underground for about 4 seasons, which is just great storytelling, which is what it's supposed to be. And then the wrestling supports the story. And one thing about so far these first 2 episodes of From Dusk Till Dawn, season 1, is that we start off immediately with this woman, and we assume it's hundreds of years ago or whatever, running around at night, and she's freaked out, and she's getting chased by like some tribesmen or whatever like that. So they're going to sacrifice her, behead her. Well, I don't know what, but she falls in like a pit or whatever, and they throw all these snakes in here, and they all bite her and just, shove, one crawls in her mouth, and you're like, holy crap. And I have to sit there and say that opening scene alone, before we even get to the really slick production of the intro credits, hooked me. And it hooked me because it's just beautiful. It's just gorgeous. Robert Rodriguez has a way of glamorizing stuff without being flashy. And there's a difference between it. And he has a grindhouse style to it. Obviously, he's a big fan of John Carpenter and other people that have that notoriety to him. And so once the credits started rolling and you started seeing some of the scenes of stuff that would come up later, and then they start with Don Johnson going into the building that you mentioned, Doctor, I'm like, oh my God, this is really good. They didn't pull any punches, getting a really good cast for this, I think. What do you guys think?
Well, definitely has a good cast in here. Like I said, Zane Holtz plays a better version of Richard Gecko than what's his name?
It's not hard to be better than Quentin Tarantino.
He's way better than Tarantino.
Zane is a very gorgeous individual, and he's got the glasses, and with the fact that they were dressed up in suits in here, and looking, like just bad bankers or whatever. They don't look like gangbangers. I think really
they're high-class thieves. That's what they are.
Exactly. And we don't know what's going on because, to your point, or to Professor's point about the flashbacks, we just start off seeing them a little bit, and you're like, holy crap, and then they do the flashbacks, and they start to flesh it out a little bit. But I agree with you. The guy has a presence, and in his role, he does a very great job. And initially, if you've seen the movie and you start watching this, I think his performance really sells it right off the bat, where you automatically okay, this guy's good. And so to me, my only question was, his brother, now he was going to do about it.
I understand what you're saying, and this one, he actually is getting the visions, unlike the other one where he said, like, that guy put him out there. The other brother was just clearly insane. This one, they built on that. They said, what we're going to take away from the reason that he does this, is because he's being led on by something. Like you see it in the shop. Richie sees, you see a girl who played by Eliza Gonzalez. We don't know who she is at this point, but she's basically telling him, you can't trust that person, or she's telling him that it's just lying. Look at her.
Well, do you want to say that he sees a gorgeous young college-aged woman who then starts whispering stuff to him, and you go, uh-oh, he's seeing visions? Is that what you mean? Yeah,
well, that's what it is. They changed that from the movie. They added that in there, so he's being led on by something or someone.
He's not just a creep anymore.
No, he's not just a pervert rapist, like in the movie.
Yeah.
So they changed that for the show, which I think actually really helps the show out, because there are some moments in the show where if it had been Quentin Tarantino would have been in the jail.
Yeah, so let me bring this around to Pixel. We were talking about the flashbacks and all that. You had mentioned before about the pacing and the slow burn, how you liked it. Of course, it's set up well this way with it, with Don Johnson and the very deliberate, not quite Southern, but there's a certain Texas drawl that goes along with the way people talk, and they're not in a rush, and you definitely get that between him and the guy who owns the shop. And not a lot of idiots in this episode, I think, and that's what makes it pretty good. Is not only is it slick, people are kind of, the 2 young girls and the guy behind the bar actually has a bigger role into it. He just doesn't sit there and gets his ass blown off, literally. He kind of helps out with that, but then we get these flashbacks. So talk to me, Professor, about the flashbacks and what you liked or didn't like about them, and if you think it works.
Well, whenever it first happened, I didn't know that we were going to be doing this like 2-3 times, but I think it helps give perspective to each character, and helps bridge it along to the point that we're supposed to be watching and paying attention to. Because in the movie, it just starts out with that scene. Okay, this is the vibe. But with a show, you have a lot of episodes you have to fill out. You have to make every scene have more to it, more meat on the bones. Someone I was watching it with said that they weren't sure how they were going to do it, because as much as they loved the movie, if it was just going to be like the movie every episode, they weren't sure that they could take that, because that would be too much of a good thing. But it is far more serious. The show handles the subject matter far more seriously than the movie ever did.
Yeah, I agree with you on that totally. I think that's a good comment. Well, let's talk a little bit about the fact that Earl, which is Don Johnson's character, is actually kind of like, and this is something that I liked rewatching it and realized, oh yeah, I didn't know at the time what was going on as far as the relationship between Earl and his other ranger that he's driving around with, a guy named Freddie. They're talking about getting baptized, so there's this religious part to it. Now I'm going, holy crap, there's a lot of stuff planted in this first episode that they're going to build upon, and they're not just having it there just for shits and giggles. They're having a conversation about Freddie's daughter getting baptized, and there's some life lessons from the older person. So there's this kind of sense of doom and gloom from him and how the real world works. And Freddie, to me, came across as somebody that was competent. He wasn't, big-eyed, goofy, idiot sort of whatever. These guys seem like they were really good. I mean, everyone always thinks about Rangers. We joke about Lone Wolf McQuaid, which we've covered on our Xtreme movie show, Kicking It, with Chuck Norris many times. But these guys really competent. And when Earl gets shot, a lot of the episode is basically Freddie trying to figure out how to see if he can get him out of there and deal with these two guys. And to your point, Pixel, they really fleshed that out a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about some of the imagery that we start seeing in here and the colors or any of the production value type stuff. And is there anything from this episode that kind of really stuck out to you, Pixel?
Production wise, I think it's been how many years since the movie, so it's definitely received a boost. But as far as sets and things like that, I think that they're truly astounding. It's far more pleasing to look at for a long time than before.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think it looks just as good as a movie, honestly. And it's kind of weird to say that because there's not a lot of different scenes, but there's more of a few sets. But it looks like it's filmed on location. It just looks good. Doctor, what about you?
Like I said, I'm kind of glad they didn't go with the whole the blade. When a vampire or whatever person gets just basically just shot or destroyed, doesn't just go the CG effect. I hate when he does everything like CG stuff. Apparently that was the thing back then, though. Blade did it. A few other ones did it too.
Yep.
Including this movie as well, I believe. But for the first two episodes, we're getting more in depth. Or we find out more about the brothers, especially in episode 2, beginning, and they're talking. Richie's talking to him, and they're sitting at another bench. They're eating their chicken, sandwich, and tacos, whatever, chicken tacos.
You don't sauce the sauce, sir.
Yes, and he is.
And they can complain about it.
We find out that Richie isn't obnoxious no matter what he's doing. He's a snob. Where Seth is just got out of prison. Apparently, he just served 5 years for a bank job. Mm-hmm. So he's out, and I'm thinking to myself, how the heck did Richie survive without getting shot, beat the crap out of him, or what? With his attitude. So we're finding out more about them, about their brother, about what they did. And I like about the show though is if you continue watching this Pixel, especially in the second season, they do touch back on these episodes. So everything's connected, and that's the one thing I love about this. Everything is connected. Everything has a purpose. Just like Ash vs. Evil Dead, everything has a reason why they do it. There's nothing left. Oh, there's nothing left unturned. That's why they did this.
Well, let me ask you this, RDV. At the end of the first episode, basically, the entire first episode, the most part is the one ranger getting shot. His partner Freddie trying to deal with him. Yep.
And has a name, sir. It's Earl.
Yeah, I know. It's hard for me to picture Don Johnson getting shot. His name was Earl. He still gets a lot of screen time. It's not just the first 2 minutes, though. I like the fact that they flesh stuff out. And then when they get to that episode 2, I think you just made a great comment when you talked about Richie's not crazy. He's a snob. And you're right, because he goes on and on about the word chata, which is like, I don't know if it's almond milk or just like milk and cinnamon and like rice, what essence or whatever it is, which is a Mexican drink, like not a dessert, but just like an aperitif, if you want to call it that way. Not the Mexicans would call it that, but it's something where you're like, man, this guy is an effing snob, right? But the point is when they go do another flashback to your point, you're right, he's a snob, but they're there at the bank showing these guys, because we're not, to me, supposed to root for them because they're bad guys, but because they're showing all these different perspectives, we might start to understand them. I think everything is getting fleshed out a bit. And even though really the only detective thing that happened in episode 1 was that they found the knife, and then there's other stuff related to that in the second episode. The flashback has Richie, taking the horchata from the one lady, and he has the knife that you see that somebody else finds in episode 1 at the lady's neck, and he's seeing visions again there too. So I think that's a great point. He's a snob, he's not crazy, but the flashbacks flesh that out, and you're like, now I understand where Richie's coming from. He's just not an idiot that got a hole shot through his hand,
Yeah, and they added a character. They added Freddie, he's basically working with Earl. He's Earl's partner, and having him outside the gas station when Earl gets shot, this adds more drama, more consequences now. Because before, he just they shot the sheriff, and then
they didn't shoot the deputy.
I know you're gonna say it.
Stop it! Oh my god.
So and then there's a big shootout with the guy. The guy's on fire, and the thing explodes. But this time, as far as we know, that's not the case. This time they're stuck and they got hostages, 2 girls, and then they're stuck in the little station. I wouldn't call it a gas station because there's no gas as far as I know.
The pit stop, baby.
Yeah, the pit stop. Yes. So we're gonna see how they get out of this was cool. He's like, you know what? And Seth is like, you can sit there and you can just call demands, but the longer this waits out, the faster your partner's gonna die. So you let us go, your partner dies. I love that how he's like, he's just like one step ahead of me. He's like, it's like, yeah, you think you're tough shit and stuff, but your buddy over there is dying.
Speaking of death, I think we should address that the body count is way less less in that scene, because only the sheriff and the gas station boy die in this version of the scene, whereas both girls died in the movie and the partner did not exist.
Yes, I think the initial impressions, for what might happen for the season is just, with 2 episodes in, it's like I'm going, okay, it looks like they're going to make season 1 basically be the movie. I'm guessing because it's 10 episodes and we're doing the first 2. So it's roughly 10 hours. They're about 45-minute episodes without commercials. So yeah, I think that's a good observation. Is they're deliberately setting the tone for going in a slightly different path than what the movie did. And even if you watch I think they were direct to VHS sequels at the time, Dusk Till Dawn 2. And I don't know if there might have been a third. I don't know that they really fleshed much out. But like I say, you get a lot. Like I say before, even the credits in episode 1, you get the Mexican-looking woman running through the jungle at night with snakes biting her, and that's something. She looks like the person that Richie's getting the occasional visions of when he stares at a woman long enough and they're whispering things in his ear. You have this knife that looks like some version of the all-seeing eye, kind of, sort of, maybe a cultish-looking symbol on it, and you're not sure exactly what's going to happen with that. And so you really do have a lot going on here.
First episode, you get to see him go after he basically the cops land there, and he's Seth grabs a burner phone, goes in the bathroom, calls Carlos.
Yes.
So we get to see Carlos, played by Fez from That 70 Show.
Not Cheech Marin. It's unfortunate.
What did we think of Carlos as a character?
At this point, you don't really know what if we could trust him or not. And he's still new, and I assume I'm with the geckos. Who can you trust? Carlos kind of jerks him around a little bit, too, on the phone.
Yes.
Yeah, and just.
But the interesting thing about Carlos is when he's talking on the phone. This is a great example of some of the things I like, and the way certain directors choose to film things is that while we have some dialogue going on, other than Seth and Richie arguing about stuff, which has their own points to it, with Carlos being a new character, he's on the phone. He's basically saying, sorry, I can't do that for you, or I'll see what I can do, and all that. He's walking through his secret underground lair, it looks like, or warehouse, or wherever it is. You assume it's across the border in Mexico. And of course, he's got the ladies in their underwear, working on the drugs, so they can't steal anything typical.
Yeah.
But not only that, there's a guy working on like artifacts in one other corner, and he looks like he's a smart dude. Then you've got somebody else working on something else, so you go, wow, this guy's not just a typical drug lord with a cocaine or whatever. That's just generic as it gets. This guy's obviously has his finger in several interests, and he doesn't seem like he's mad or angry or lost control. He seems very precise and particular and somewhat smart. And so in episode 2, what's kind of neat is that we see him getting fleshed out a little bit more, because he basically says, hey guys, I can't pick you up, my boss won't let me. And Seth's like, well wait a minute, I thought you're the boss. He's like, no. So he's like, but meet me here, I'll pick you up. We see him park his car, I believe, but then acts like his car is not, like it's run out of gas. So this kid that's going to pick up his girlfriend, Kate, who we'll talk about in a moment, he starts talking to him, and he's a religious guy or whatever, and they have this nice little conversation. And one scene that's neat here, I think, is while they're driving, he basically says, hey, do you believe in Jesus? He's like, yes, sir, one and only. And no matter what anybody's religious beliefs are, the guy explains it to it. He says, yeah, he's the one and only. And he goes, where I come from, there's a whole bunch, and the soul chooses, like which spirit to follow. And it goes through this explanation. And what's cool to me about it is this is fleshing out the Mexican folklore, as it were, about what we may see later on and how things are different. And I'm just planting that seed because it was fairly obvious, because then he turns into some sort of creature. I don't know if he looks like a snake maybe, or a werewolf, or a vampire, but it's during the day, and he bites the dude's neck. And then later on we'll actually see the kid and him make an appearance. But I thought it was kind of neat, because obviously this is going to be not just about the people that we're seeing, whether they're good or bad, but it's also about the folklore of what's going on, not just Christian, but Mexican in this case. And that's one thing that I'd mentioned before on El Rey, when they debuted their show, and also debuted the entire station when they debuted the Lucha Underground. They had their own little mythology that went with it, and I thought that's a great way to kind of honor a particular place, where in the first movie it was just a setting. It was a titty bar going to Mexico because it's across the border. That's really the only function that's served. And then here they're already putting it in, and you're like, wow, this is only in the middle of episode 2. This is pretty good. So yeah, there's definitely a lot to really point out to him at all. But outside of Carlos, we do briefly meet Kate and Scott Fuller. Kate is the young girl that this guy, that's her boyfriend, met, I'm guessing, at religious camp or school or something. And then her brother, Scott! And then, of course, the guy that I didn't recognize at first, but then once he started talking, I was like, that's him, take the beard away. And that's Robert Patrick playing Jacob Fuller. So this is the religious people in their RV that were going, oh, okay, from the movie. They're now here in episode 2. This is what it looks like. So what did you guys think of them?
Well, as for them, I was a little surprised, because whenever it starts, the father, Jacob Fuller, Robert Patrick, is belting out gospel songs. And where we start out in the movie, he's basically lost his faith completely, and he's not talking about it. Anything on the subject, he just pushes away. But here he's just starting out with that, and then I think the dynamic of having the daughter wanting to run away was interesting. And, well, we'll talk about how that comes to fruition later on, I suppose.
What about you, Doctor? Any thoughts on the family that we get introduced to?
Kate and Scott were more interesting than that guy is playing the father at this point. But like I said, the father at this point, you really don't know much about him. We know about the movie. That their wife. He lost his faith because his wife died. Now in the show, we don't know if they're going to connect it or not. But eventually, you gotta continue watching the show to figure out what's going on with that, if there's any difference or not. But at this point, he just seems like, okay, he's just a guy that's, is annoying. And the father, Kate, she kind of wants to leave. And the brother, he's not as innocent as he looks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Scott is good in this series. I'll give you that.
But not early on.
No. But I want to talk more about the shootout in the first episode, man.
Okay.
The close-ups of the guns. I like that, when he does, be cool. Everybody cool. You be cool. He does that. Pixel, what do you think is better? Him saying DJ Cortana or George Clooney when they said those lines?
That's really hard choice. But I do prefer George Clooney. But I think that's another point to touch on. The casting is fantastic to have somebody play that character now. I think he fits the role really well, and he delivers the line fantastically.
Yeah, I think I didn't know him, and I didn't know Zane Holtz at all, so I still don't really know either of them from anything other than this show, and I know they've probably done a few things, but I had said before earlier that I thought Zane Holtz really nailed it in his role, and so to me, I will tell you that it took me a while to come around to DJ Cortana's portrayal, but I liked it. And here's the thing, like I said, I was never a huge George Clooney fan. I don't hate him, actually. I think he's done some okay stuff, and I actually liked him, and this movie turned me on to him and going, okay, he's not bad if he gets cast right. And I always said that in the movie I really liked him kind of being a negotiator as opposed to being a badass, because I can't see George Clooney as a badass at all, no matter how he's portrayed. And then here we definitely get a lot of that chemistry between these two guys arguing with each other, which I think is good. And there's a lot more meat behind it from what we've seen. But I think DJ actually delivers it better. I really do think of it. And he's just as good looking as George Clooney, in my opinion. He may not be as tall, but they're both not exactly the biggest guys, but they're good looking. And he does have a little bit of swagger, where Clooney seems to, not to really have it. I can't buy George Clooney with the neck tattoo, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Whereas this guy, he's got the suit on, he carries it well, it looks real. And I think the way he handles the gun, to your point, Doctor, much better job the way it looks. Absolutely. I will say that I think so far these two are better than the two in the movie.
I like the fact that you see John Johnson, his character Earl gets shot, and he's laying down there, so he's like, well, so he basically surrenders, it's Freddy surrenders, goes in there, and then he's like, puts his hand on him, and then like he's sitting there, they're kind of having a little private conversation, kind of looks to him. So they're kind of Richie and Seth are kind of distracted, and all of a sudden, like, dude, like Earl gets back up, and there's a huge old shootout with all four of them. It's crazy. It's You see that's when you are seeing the close up of the guns pointed at you. You see that stub nose 45, which can blow a hole right through you.
And
a huge hole.
And Earl gets to deal the shot that puts a hole through Richie's hand.
Yes. So we still get that. So they kept the hole in the hand parts, which I thought was pretty good. Earl ends up running out of bullets. And so he goes down. He's basically screwed. He's gonna die. Especially if you're in a room with Richie. He's a freak. So he picks his hand off the ground. Richie comes up and just basically knows that he's out of bullets. Walks up real slow, like I'm a badass. At this, where's his gun and just shoots him right in the head. After he basically flicks him off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Seth is basically took his Snub 45 and just was putting rounds into Freddy, the sheriff's partner or ranger. He's a ranger.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, we don't know if he's dead or alive. You know, at this point, you know, so he basically gets knocked back outside through the door. It's laying on the ground. We go back in after their John Johnson's laying there with a hole in his head. We see Richie on the ground. He's screaming. He looks up. He's seeing snake demons and all monster. And it turns out it's just the girls that are the hostages. So he's having a vision of like snake people beating the crap out of him. It's actually just two girls. So I don't know if he just hates those girls that much. You know, thinks they look like snakes. But
or he's pissed because they rebuffed him, and even though he's a good-looking guy, and he's being kind of pervy with her, you know, you can tell she likes the attention, but then she's like, "Get away, creep."
And then so basically Seth walks in and is like, "What the hell's going on?" He basically and she just mounts off to him a little bit, and then like, you know, Seth, he's like, "You know what?" and just basically lets him leave instead of killing him. Yeah, because Seth isn't a killer; he's a bank robber.
When the girls were kicking him, it was I couldn't help but laugh. I was like, yes, go ahead.
Well, the two ladies that were in there, what I will say about this, and it can be tricky, is that they're very good looking. You know, they're not like model hot, but they're very attractive. Their clothes fit well. They seem like their age. I think when they talked a little bit in episode 2, when they were sitting there getting interviewed, and they're like, "Yes, sir," the one girl does. And they have the same Texas accent. I thought they were cast really well too, even though they seem to be minor characters. I don't know if we'll see them anymore. But the point is they weren't, you know, bubblegum popping or on my cell phone bimbo types that walk in there that we instantly hate and therefore don't like them. I think one of the hardest things for a lot of people to nail and get right is when you're reimaging some material, like in this case, of course, story is everything, but you know, you can have the greatest story in the world and a lot of little backstory like that's been hinted at so far, but if you don't care about any of the characters, it's really, really difficult to want to keep watching past an episode or two. But so far, with the flashbacks and being vested in some of the storylines as far as understanding what's going on without too much information, I think is good. So right now, after these two, I don't know if they're going to be introducing a lot more characters. I'm sure some will probably come and go. But the only other character I want to talk about briefly before we turn into our final thoughts here is we do see Freddy. We know that the conversation he was having with his boss was about baptizing or being the godfather to his kid, and so we see him sitting down at the table with his wife having conversations about it. And what I thought was really good about this scene too, it's not the wife's not a nagging wife where she's like, "You need to do this, you need to do that," where we go, "Shut up," you know. She's like, they're having a very mature adult conversation, and feels like there's no manipulation going on, and they seem like a good couple. One's not hotter than the other that looks like they're unbelievable. They got the cute kid, you know, and they show the real baby, and they have a nice conversation. You're like, wow, a functional family. And I think the only concern for Freddie is of course he wants to, you know, be a husband, and you know, his partners basically tell him, hey, if you're gonna do it right. You know, don't do like I did and not be there. Time is short, sort of thing. And of course, him having the opportunity to try to heal him or at least stop the bleeding in episode 1 may be a bigger scene later on. So there's a lot of little things to it, but I just thought the wife's performance was, even though it wasn't on their screen for a long period of time, I didn't get the feeling like the two girls that were in there were throwaway characters. So to me, I really appreciated the fact towards the end of episode 2 that, wow, so far we've almost not really seen any stupid ass characters or people that we go, just die already. We haven't. We've had a lot of little images shown to us. We've had some interesting flashbacks that we're going to go, okay, I guess we're going to have to get used to this. No flash forwards at least. And when we have the flashbacks as a viewer, we know when they're happening. So that's good. It's nothing like, you know, Westworld, which, you know, tries to be slick and just dump them in and you don't know, which is just crap. It's for the viewer. It's just disgusting. So I think they nailed it. I think they did a really good job. The only other thing here for this episode 2 that we can talk about here is that the brothers end up getting a fight as they're leaving because of the flashback to the shootout at the bank, and you know, with this one lady, and Carlos basically, who's trying to follow them, stops at the same place that they had their fight, and he looks at the ground and he sees this image that looks like the same all-seeing eye type symbol that was on the knife. So we're like, I don't know what the hell that is, but I know it's all kind of related. I know this guy's kind of supernatural, like a vampire or something, even though it's during the day. So I just wanted to make sure that we address that.
Well, I wanted to mention, whenever we see Carlos, he's always bundled up whenever he's outside. Other
Yes.
than when he's disguising as the kid. But even then, I think he has the shade of the trees to help him out. So I think he's definitely, because we see those snake-like pincers come out as he's draining, what's her name? The daughter's boyfriend.
Kyle or whatever. I think it was Kyle.
Kyle's lame anyway, so.
Yeah, he was the lame one. I'm sorry. Okay. You're right. Kyle was lame. He served his purpose.
He served his purpose, and the daughter went back with the father, and I think the transition, though it wasn't fully shown, but whenever you see the scales appear on the boyfriend, and then there's like a glance to the trunk to show the dead body of the boyfriend, and then you look back and, oh, it's Carlos. I think that was very neat. And as we can see, it's not just a gray husk anymore, it's a drained gray husk.
It's Kyle Winthrop. Apparently he had a last name that we never knew about.
Go die Kyle. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true too. So yeah, they pack a lot in these 2 episodes. So for me, my final thoughts are pretty much kind of what I said at the beginning, that I think the first 2 episodes are very slick. I think they do a great job of hooking you when you watch this, not just the way it looks, because that's nice and it can draw you in, but then there's got to be some meat on the bone to want to keep you and some characters to do that. And right now, the dynamic between the brothers are obviously front and center, but I'm kind of interested in some of the side stuff to see what's going on. I think it's well cast. It looks great. And so when I watched this, I actually was watching it whenever it dropped, every episode weekly, I think it was on El Rey. And so this was one of the last TV shows that I said, man, I can't wait till the next episode, because it wasn't until much sooner than this, then they would just start dropping everything on Netflix. Netflix was probably doing already at that point. I really didn't have a Netflix account at the time, so I can't speak to that. But I will say that, man, it's how TV should be. And I thought, I don't know if they can keep this up. Is it going to slow down after 10 episodes? Is it going to suck around episode 4 or 5? But I just knew that I couldn't wait to talk about episode 3. So next week when we talk about episode 3 and 4, I'm going to be really excited, because there's a lot here that's a good foundation for it. So let me ask you, RDV, what are your final thoughts about these 2 episodes?
Like I said, the whole entire show, at least for these first 2 episodes, you're not really know what's going on, but you're biting at the bits. Especially the more you see Eliza Gonzalez, oh man. Yeah. So and you find out who she is, later on. If you haven't found out yet, I don't think they said who she is, but you see more of her. Yeah, this show picks up, and I love, like I said, this show is, if you're not invested in this show by now, or maybe you're kind of having wishy-washy feelings, maybe like, I watched 2 episodes, I don't know if I want to continue it. You're gonna wait, man. But I guarantee you, it starts off slow, but once you get towards the end of season 1, you're like, holy crap, I'm glad I stayed. Season 2 even gets even better. I believe there was supposed to be a 3rd season, but the 3rd season ended up getting the show got canceled. But it wrapped up the series nicely though. But it did leave a little cliffhanger though. So I was like, man, I wish they would have continued, And a lot of people did. So Madison Davenport, who plays Kate Folger, great actress. Her character grows throughout the series. Same with her interactions with Richie. Like I said, this whole series is like a great casting, and just the way they flesh it out, it's like, wow, you do this from a movie that was a kid, and the movie itself was good. And then I understand that, yeah, some people are like, oh yeah, the movie's kind of boring and stuff, This series actually fleshes out, and actually, I think what is Robert Rodriguez originally wanted to change more of it. Mm-hmm. But they only had a limited budget. Being able to do a TV series, they're able to get away with doing more lore into it. I want more movies like this. Forget the Snyder Cut. I want movies to turn them into TV shows and actually build onto them. I want, yeah. Especially if it's a Robert Rodriguez or Quentin Tarantino. Pulp Fiction turned into a TV series. Why not?
Well, I think this is the actual template for the way to do it. And I agree with you on that. And I think around in about 10, 15 minutes when we have our Xtreme movie show with Enlutine from I Love Comics, we're going to be talking about two things. We're going to talk about Unhinged, the movie with Russell Crowe. I'm going to review that with you guys, and we'll see how that goes. But also a bunch of DC trailers that dropped, and one of the complaints I have about comic book movies is just exactly what you said, is I'd rather see something where it gets fleshed out a bit. So I think that's a great point.
Yep.
All right, Pixel, your final thoughts.
I mean, this is my first view, so I don't know how anything ends up, but I just have to say, for how they've handled it, from translating the scenes from the movie into more substantial consumable content, they've done fantastic. The job they did is insane. I really enjoyed the first 2 episodes, and I look forward to moving on.
Well, there you have it, folks. Season 1 from Dusk Till Dawn that was on El Rey. It's now currently showing on Netflix. All 3 seasons, 10 episodes each are on. Check it out if you haven't seen it. If you have, check it out again and let us know what you think about it so we can cover it. Next week will be episodes 3 and 4 of Season 1. I'd like to thank Pixel and RDV for showing up and kind of just chit-chatting a little bit about it. It's always nice to get some fresh perspectives. Johnny, I see you there in chat. I hope you check that out too. It seems like you're aware of it, watching Lucha yourself. I wish El Jefe would show up somewhere at some point. I thought he was a great actor in that too, but we can't have everything we want in life, but what we can have is a nice time talking about this next week as well. So thank you guys for listening. More importantly, thank you guys for sharing and getting the word out about the Xtreme Movie Show and what we cover. Right now, we've been doing the Saturday night season 1s of different shows just to work on some different audiences. We, of course, have our flagship show that includes Top 10 Tuesday with Angleton from I Love Comics. We have Kick in It with action films. We have some minor ones that we do occasionally to Extreme Horror Show, Extreme Classics, Extreme Sci-Fi. So check them all out. If you have any requests, let us know. This is Robin for Pixel and RDV and Angleton and everybody else. Let me be the first to sit there and say thanks for listening, and as always, stay extreme. Good night, everybody.
Good night, kids.